On paper, performance systems like demerits and productivity-determined bonuses make perfect sense. We measure performance, reward good behavior, and punish bad behavior. Then performance improves. At least that's the assumption. But if performance systems worked the way organizations expect them to, people would feel motivated by performance reviews. Incentives would consistently improve outcomes, and punishment would lead to learning instead of fear. But that's not what most people experience. Today, we're asking a big question. Why do performance systems so often backfire? I'm Professor Bailey. I have a Ph.D. in organizational communication, and this is Everyday Organizational Behavior, a research-backed series where we unpack the micro moments, relational dynamics, and people-driven forces that shape our work and our lives, often a lot more than we realize. To understand why performance systems fail, we need to look at the assumptions they're built on and how humans actually respond to control, rewards, and evaluation. Most performance systems are rooted in early behaviorists and economics models of motivation. If people perform well, reward them. If they perform poorly, correct or punish them. If outcomes are clear and consequences are consistent, people will adjust their behavior accordingly. This logic assumes motivation is primarily external, something that can be shaped through incentives and consequences. And in very narrow, short-term situations, this approach can work. But work is rarely narrow, and motivation is rarely that simple. Punishment often backfires by shifting people from learning to self-protection. Organizational scholars like Philip Podsakoff and colleagues conducted a large meta-analysis on leader reward and punishment behaviors. Their research showed that punishment tends to suppress undesired behavior in the short term, but it does not teach people what to do instead. When punishment becomes part of a performance system, people shift from learning to self-protection. They hide mistakes instead of surfacing them, avoid risk instead of innovating, and they focus on not getting in trouble rather than doing great work. As author Kohn suggests in his 1999 book, Punished by Rewards, punishment creates compliance, not commitment. Over time, punishment erodes trust and psychological safety, and without psychological safety, people stop asking questions, they stop experimenting, and they stop improving. While punishment may look like accountability, it often produces fear, and fear is a really terrible foundation for sustained performance. Rewards backfire too by changing what the work means. Rewards are supposed to motivate, but decades of research suggest that they often have unintended consequences. One of the most influential explanations comes from psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, whose work on self-determination theory shows that when rewards are experienced as controlling, they can undermine intrinsic motivation, that internal motivation we have to do work and to do a good job. This effect is captured in what Deci, Ryan, and Richard Kessner later called the over-justification effect. When people start doing work just for the reward, the meaning of the work shifts. The question becomes, what do I get for this? Not, why does this matter? Rewards also narrow people's attention. We often optimize for what's being measured and rewarded, even if that means we neglect something more important. This is why reward systems often lead to gamifying metrics, short-term gains at long-term costs, and competition where collaboration is needed instead. As Deci, Kessner, and Ryan's meta-analysis shows, rewards don't just motivate behavior, they reshape how people experience work itself. And finally, even just evaluating people's behavior to decide on rewards and punishment can cause issues. Performance systems usually culminate in performance appraisals. When people know they're being judged, their focus shifts from learning to impression management. So feedback feels risky, mistakes feel dangerous, and development takes a backseat to just surviving. Add in perceived unfairness, bias, unclear criteria, and power differences, and performance appraisals often become demotivating rather than motivating. People don't resist feedback because they hate improvement. They resist systems that feel controlling, opaque, or disconnected from their real lived experience at work. The deeper problem with rewards, punishment, and performance reviews is control-based design. At their core, many performance systems assume that motivation has to be imposed from the outside. People need to be monitored to perform, and behavior can be just engineered through consequences. So performance systems, they backfire because they misunderstand how motivation works in the first place. Because these control-heavy systems confuse compliance with commitment. If organizations want better performance, they need to stop asking, how do we get people to do what we want? And start asking, how do we design systems that support how people actually work?